Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Manager and Program Co-Chair, Eric Kraft.
Thank you very much. It's great to see all of you here at Enterprise Connect 2016. I want to welcome you to what we think is going to be an interesting, productive, hopefully fun week where you're going to learn a lot and hear a lot about where communications technology is going for the enterprise. We're going to open with our first general session focusing on unified communications as we have before. And we've got, again, a really terrific panel of some of the key strategic vendors in this space who are going to talk about where we think UC is going. And we've titled this session, Is the Path to UC Changing? And I think what we're trying to get at is UC's been around a while now, but certainly all of the trends that we see in technology, all the trends we see in the enterprise have kind of buffeted this UC technology and pushed it in this way, that, as it makes its way forward. So how is what unified communications is and what it means for you and your users changing? And again, we're very fortunate this year, once again, to have 4 of our folks who you'll see as keynoters over the next 2 days, on Tuesday and Wednesday, taking part in this panel as well. So we'll definitely have some great strategic insights from them. And I'm going to bring them out right now. We're starting with Gary Barnett, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Engagement Solutions at Avaya.
Morning, Eric. How are you?
The second of all. And next is Rowan Trollope, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Collaboration Technology Group at Cisco.
Yeah.
A few fans there. Thanks, Rowan. Next is Adam Swidler, Technology Evangelist for Google for Work at Google. And then we have Zig Serafin, Corporate Vice President, Skype for Business Services at Microsoft. Thanks, Zig. And our next panelist is Wes Durow, Chief Marketing Officer at Mitel. And next is Ram Mengani, Vice President for Unified Communications Product and Support at NEC. And finally, we have Jan Hickish, VP of Portfolio Management and Marketing at Unify. And I'm joined as the co-moderator for this session by Jim Burton, who many of you already know, President of CT Link, part of the BC Strategies Group, and a longtime friend of the show. Thanks, Jim. Well, made the walk over here, and the session's almost over. No. So we call this session, Is the Path to UC Changing? And I think, you know, the question that I wanted to start with really has to do with one of the changes that we've seen a lot of, or a lot of talk about, maybe more so than we've seen a lot of it in the last year, and especially many of your companies, certainly Microsoft and Cisco, have talked a lot about the cloud and about the role that the cloud is going to play in being the platform kind of the future for enterprise communications. So that seems to be clearly the direction that probably all of you, certainly Adam, are talking about the industry going in. But I don't, you know, we did a survey of this audience where more than half of the respondents said they didn't have a plan for a cloud migration. And we, with the cloud generally, and certainly in communications, we see this kind of hesitance, people concerned about security, reliability, control, all those things. So I guess I want to start out on the cloud and ask, is the cloud at this point at least more vendor push than customer pull? And I'll just
Yeah.
go down the line, start with Gary.
Great. No, I think it's very real, and I think what we've seen is that everyone has a different opinion about what it is. So, for example, when it comes to private cloud, we've seen terrific growth, and that's been much more of a pull than it has been a push. On the other hand, moving everything to public cloud, I would say, has been a mix of push and pull, depending on who the customer is. But it's definitely real. I think a lot of the confusion is there's just not one definition of cloud, so you really have to listen to the customer to understand what their needs are. And not that everything is customized, but at the same time, you have to be very flexible in that deployment.
Okay. Rowan, I want to pick up on it, in terms of this idea of the cloud meaning different things to different people. It seems like Cisco kind of has two clouds. There's sort of the HCS story with the service providers, and then there's what you guys have really talked about more recently of the collaboration cloud. How do customers, enterprises think about those two Cisco visions of the cloud?
Well, I think, we started with HCS, and back to this point about the difference between private and public and the different kinds of clouds. HCS is one of those examples because essentially that's a premise-based PBX that has been cloudified in order to be operated as a service by an SP. And we took a completely new approach when we built Spark. We said, well, we need to go to a true public cloud infrastructure with a hybrid story, with an ability to take pieces of that managed cloud infrastructure operated by Cisco and actually push it into to the edge of the network. Because I think when you talk about what no one has really done successfully is delivered a business class communications cloud purely in the cloud. You have to leverage the edge, otherwise your costs get out of control, the reliability goes out the window, there's a whole bunch of problems that exist. So our strategy is actually a real cloud service with Spark, push down and then leveraging the premise in unique and new ways. And in terms of your question about customer pull versus vendor push, I think it's absolutely customer pull, but everybody's different. Everyone wants a different version of that, right? Your SMB guys are probably okay with one thing, whereas your large enterprises expect something else. So, but I think, by and large, it's customer pull across the boards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Adam?
So I think I'm probably not capable of giving an unbiased answer to this particular question. But I do think that there are, again, you have to be clear on what the definition of the cloud is. For some people, private cloud is essentially just IT these days. And this notion of sort of dramatically improved cost savings, efficiency, reliability, and security is a reality for a particular business challenge that you're trying to solve. But again, what that challenge is will determine what the cloud solution will be for that. But definitely, the fundamental factors driving people to the cloud are absolutely legitimate, and it's a market pull as opposed to a vendor push.
Mm-hmm. And is that, just before, from a Google perspective, where Google hasn't yet really jumped into the communications, within a Google skin or within a Google solution, is that a matter of partnerships, and if an enterprise is building sort of a broader Google Cloud strategy, they look to you and you say these are our partners for communications?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, our approach has been really focused on the collaborative actions that the users are trying to accomplish. And so our communication strategy starts from that context of the work that's being performed. That's why you see a lot of interactions that take place around a document or around a spreadsheet, but the majority of the focus is on the work product, and sort of the actual real-time communication surrounds that, but in some ways is a complement to it. And so that's been our approach, is focusing on the work and the document or the output that's being created, allow people to collaborate on that and surround it with a real-time communication layer, voice, video, text, and really have the origin point be around that collaborative process as opposed to around a network for communication. And we have chosen to fill the needs that some of our customers have in those areas with partnerships on the telephony side.
And Zig, Microsoft obviously has kind of been really out there in the past year talking about the Office 365 component for Skype for Business. What's been the reaction to that and this issue of sort of push versus pull?
Yeah, it's a great place to start, actually, is this question about unified communications and cloud. If you take a step back and you look at the larger picture on how people are thinking about their productivity experience, and you point to, sort of the leading indicator, which is where people are making their investments around their core productivity stack, their collaboration stack, there's this tremendous amount of momentum and investment that's taking place in the cloud. There's over 60 million business users around the world today that are using Office 365 today. And what that's doing is actually getting people to say, okay, let's now rethink how communications is part of that productivity experience. And that actually opens up the opportunity for everybody in this audience in context of saying, look, you've got this major change in how people think about the underlying fabric for productivity, and then you say, how does communications become a part of that? Now, the second thing is that if you say, is there a vendor push or a customer pull, is a lot of the things that have existed so far for how people have actually have had to make choices around what's available in cloud for communications has actually required thinking about a completely new experience or yet another different vendor that you have to end up working with. And what we've heard from customers is, no, please make it easy for me. Don't create more complexity. Reduce the complexity of what it takes to run this stuff on-prem internally in my own environment, but make it more simple, more easy to consume, more flexible. Give me the security, compliance requirements, resiliency, et cetera, that I have spent painstaking amount of time to be able to maintain on myself. But now, do it in the cloud using a public cloud-based infrastructure to do that. And so if you can do that with flexibility and topology, where you have hybrid support, you have cloud, there's a lot of it's a big mix in between that exists depending upon what country you're in, and at the same time not require a rethink on user experience. That then opens up the doors for a tremendous opportunity in conjunction with the productivity capabilities that people are already investing in.
So let me just follow up. You kind of tossed in there with hybrid support. Why is hybrid support? Why do you need hybrid support if everything's going to the cloud?
Well, there's a reality. I mean, people have some workloads people expect to have for business reasons. They want to have those running in their own data centers, in their own on-premise environments. There's staging. Nothing, as we very well know in this industry, it's not an overnight thing. You can't turn the light off and turn it off and be able to say, hey, all of a sudden everything's running in the cloud. You have to create the flexibility of what that transition looks like, have the options. And if you do that, and you do it without having to go and retrain people on a whole other new tool set, then you're ultimately opening up the opportunity to the cloud, which by definition in our mind it's a hybrid cloud.
Mm-hmm. But and just to one more other follow-up, is the idea that the sort of weight or the percentage that will be on-prem or whatever, is there a reason for that to retain its dominance in a large enterprise for a long, the longish term, maybe medium to long term, or is,
Well, the reality is the more you get into a multi-tenant public cloud infrastructure, the more flexibility, simplicity, cost reduction you're going to get. But at the same time, as I said, you can't do it overnight. And our view is that at least for the foreseeable medium-term time frame, you're going to see mixed implementations. But again, in an environment where, for instance, things like your management console, for instance, isn't a completely different thing that you end up running on-prem versus what you end up running in the cloud. Mm-hmm. And so people are expecting an ROI that comes from this new way of moving to the cloud, but in this hybrid environment. And it doesn't mean that you're trying to bleed the old technology into the new way of thinking about things.
Okay. All right, before I go to Wes, I want to remind everyone we're doing questions this year on Twitter. So if you have a question for the group, please tweet that from your mobile or if you got your laptop, and they'll come up here to us and we'll read them off that way. Wes, Mitel has been in the cloud for some time. What are you seeing?
I think the path to the cloud and the transition to the cloud was really set by those outside of our category. If you think about NetSuite with accounting, you think about Salesforce with your sales information, you think about SuccessFactors with your HR information. So we've put many of the company's most precious assets already in the cloud. So that transition is underway. I think what we've seen over the last 5 years is certainly there's growth there. It's being pulled by different segments of customers. We believe strongly that there is multiple paths to the cloud. So when we talk about hybrid, it means something different to different people. I think the next big path, and I think where we can see an acceleration point, is this notion of the mobile cloud. The first device people pick up every morning, the last device they put away at the end of the day is their smartphone. How does the cloud help traverse an experience there that's a native experience, so we're not having to log back in, hit another application environment. How do we make it seamless? As seamless as the experience I have when I toggle between my personal email and my professional email. When we can do that and make it that seamless, that's the next phase, and that's what we're seeing in terms of not just the cloud, but frankly the path to the mobile cloud.
Okay. Ron, NEC's made some big announcements around the Univerge Cloud. Where are you kind of on this push versus pull? Was that because customers were saying, I'm ready to go?
Yep. No, Eric, that's a good question. Basically, NEC is in a unique place, right? We have been in the market for 50 years. We have a lot of base in the market, both SMB and enterprise, and globally. So we're pretty strong there. What we are seeing is the cloud, which we have recently announced, Univerge Blue. There is a lot of interest, especially the pull from the market for SMB market. On the enterprise market, we have seen that it's more of a pull into it. What I mean by that is a lot of time the enterprise customers get excited about the cloud, and price seems to be one of the major factors that helps them to look into it and see if they can reduce their costs and all that. But in the real sense, I think, as some of my colleagues have said, the infrastructure today is still hybrid. The people are still using a lot of TDM in the areas, like especially if you look at the healthcare and all that. They still see the reliability in there. So from our perspective, the Univerge Blue Cloud, which we have introduced, is fully scalable from SMB to enterprise. We can have a hybrid combination where the customers can have a data center ready, unified communication on-premise, and maybe have instance in the cloud. So we're looking at those type of situations, working with the customers and meeting the requirement as we go by.
Yeah, now that Circuit has been out for a while, longer than kind of any of the other comparable products within the enterprise space, is that changing the way that people who use Circuit think about the cloud, or think about not necessarily the end users themselves, but the communications people, the IT people, and they see how, what's involved in supporting Circuit or how people are adopting it? Does that change the way they think about the cloud?
Yes, that's true. So the way it's...
That's for the
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's great that you're talking about Circuit. It's fine. But yeah, in fact, from what we've seen with our customers, there's a lot of pull. They were experiencing Circuit at the beginning, have seen how easy it is to work together, to work in virtual teams, working with people outside of the organization. And this has really changed their perception and their way to go. On the other side, we see a second really important part of it. A lot of customers are investing on their business critical application side into cloud as well. Certain are just trialing, others are again let's say they finish the trial and they move forward. And so I think a great value proposition is to integrate business critical applications served out of the cloud with communication and collaboration out of the cloud. And I think this is multiplying the pull from the customers.
Okay. All right. Jim?
Well, we'll change topics a little bit. It was 10 years ago that Microsoft and Cisco announced that unified communications was their product platform that they were going to the market with, and over time, everyone followed suit with that. And at that time, it seemed it was really more click to communicate. How can you put all these silos of communications together to make it easy for people to communicate and collaborate? Well, here we are 10 years later, and clearly we've gone through a lot of evolution. A lot of integrating communications into business processes was important. But as you look at where we are today, in fact, we were having a conversation backstage. One of the companies in this collaboration space today isn't on stage, Slack. And so the question is, where are we in our industry? What is defining it, and what should people be looking at as we're moving forward? Because we've gone beyond click to communicate. You've all done an admirable job of that. By the way, it took you a little longer to get there than I thought, but we're there. So what should we be looking at? We might as well just go this direction backwards.
Okay, so when you look to UC, and 5 years ago, we were trying to make UC as such better. But when it comes to changes in the industry, there are different ways of coming to those changes, right? You can evolve
You can find a new space you want to add to the whole space to make it more interesting, more exciting, more beneficial to the customers, or you're going to disrupt. And I think right now we are in a time where we see probably all of that happening together. And the industry, I wouldn't say is struggling, but we are right now in a play field where there are a lot of opportunities. And I think the most important thing is to listen to what's going on, to listen to the customers, and to understand their main needs in order to not fulfill all and everything in the nitty-gritty details, but to really come up with the right trends and move the industry to the right path forward. And I think cloud and mobile first, or even mobile only, very interesting concepts to talk about, and you should not just think about that, you should work on that, otherwise you're getting into trouble.
Good.
Yes. So Jim, I think since we have been in this business for a long time, the unified communication has changed. Just an example is typically, as you said, click to call or presence used to be the status that you want to know. That has changed to more of awareness. The awareness could be where one of the challenge that unified communication had is people adopting it because of the way they can use it. If it's automatic, for example, if I am on the stage now based on my calendar, my ringer tone on my phone can go to a silent mode, right? So the awareness factor, right? So beyond that, what we see is the mobility, the biometrics in there for security purpose. And then as we are moving further into the communication market, it is changing very aggressively. So I would say from unified communication to more of the information and communication technology like ICT. So from that perspective, what we see is having a combined infrastructure of UC and IT plays a very important role because they go hand in hand, and then putting the vertical flow into that, for example, if it's healthcare, education, and all that, those are other components where you need to look at it, and then how to integrate some social media and all those type of stuff into that,
well,
give you the full benefit.
One of the places that certainly you guys have flourished on is vertical markets, yep, and gone really well after that.
Yep, that's true.
Wes, I want to throw the same question to you, but add a little something, because you guys have been big on mobility, and you've got some real strength there. So not to take away from the Slack type of question, but let's compound yours a little bit with that.
Yeah, no, the Slack question is a great one. I think, you know, there's three big things. One, I think when we started this journey, we thought everything was going to be a horizontal platform. And the reality is people work in vertical applications every day. If you're in healthcare in the US, you work in Epic. If you're in field services, you work in an application like FieldAware. Those have to intersect back with horizontal application environments to really speed the flow of communications. So how companies decouple their application feature set and embed them into vertical segments, pretty important, and it still has to fit back together seamlessly with the investments they made yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So I think that's the first big step. The second element is around mobility and the notion that most of us, you know, on average spend 3+ hours a day between our smartphone, our tablets, and so forth. And are we designing for that environment first, or, you know, for a desktop environment? When you design for that environment first, you really have to simplify and think about a native experience. And I even give the example, you know, my own kids, if they're going to use an application, they just want to they want to tap to connect. They don't want to log in. They don't want to do anything else. And they also are, they prefer text messaging. They prefer things like Instagram and Snapchat. Completely different way these millennials communicate than what we grew up and built these systems for. So that evolution has to take place fast, and certainly, you know, that's what we enable on the wireless side every day. You know, somebody like AT&T, you know, we deliver nearly 2 billion text messages a day on our backbone. And where we see it all coming together, if you think about the transition to 4G and the movement to IoT and to M2M, you know, 4G is when IP becomes the backbone of the wireless network. So, you know, we go from one camp speaking English and one camp speaking French to everybody speaks German or everybody speaks Japanese. At least we're all in the same language at that point in time. And that becomes pretty important because it now allows us to move, when we talk about Internet of Things, we talk about M2M, who's driving those decisions? It's the business decision makers in the company that are trying to solve a problem. So if I'm in healthcare, you know, my father-in-law just had a pacemaker put together. It'd be great if that would not just signal back to another machine, but actually to a nurse who then can tap to connect a button to have a video conference and seamlessly pull somebody else in. 4G, 5G allow us to do that because it's an order of magnitude faster, and we can give our customers a path to that future. The cloud simply becomes the bridge to get there.
Great. Sig.
Well,
I just want to make a comment. The first session that we did, it was VoiceCon, I guess, back in those days, was we had a panel. And on that panel was Zig Serafin representing Microsoft 10 years ago.
I think Charlie Giancarlo was there as well, Cisco. And that was actually, if I remember that panel, that was one where there was the PBX to all of a sudden everybody on the stage called themselves a unified communication provider. So it was an interesting moment. So first off, if you kind of look at what's happened and how does that actually start to act as a foundation for where things might start to go, I think by and large, when we think about the underlying communication system itself, the sort of the narrative that's out there is one where people aren't just talking about, oh, I just want a phone system, or I just want a conferencing system, or I want to be able to have a video system. People are thinking of it as one communications fabric that actually is enabling the kind of modalities that are necessary for the context of what people are trying to do. So if I want to do a video call and I want to switch that to the ability to message and go back and forth, I would like to share what's actually happening. I mean, this is all one communication system, one software system that by and large starts to change what people expect out of how they connect with each other, and by and large is starting to adapt to what we as humans are meant to be able to do without having to sort of put us in the middle of stitching things together. And so if you take that context, then you say now, if you look at the number of devices that we all run around with, the number of devices that we see in meeting rooms, the use cases in different vertical industries, whether it's healthcare as an example, people are expecting a mobility of that experience across a variety of different devices that they're using. It isn't just about the mobile phone. I mean, mobile phone's one very important dimension, but if I walk into a meeting room, how does that experience actually consistently and in a very familiar way appear to me in such a way where I don't have to go relearn a completely new habit, as an example? And now if you couple all of that with the fact that you're starting to see cloud play into this. Cloud, we talked a lot about the fact that you have a provisioning and manageability and implementation and cost reduction dimension to it. But there's another dimension in cloud, which is intelligence. And as a result of intelligence and leveraging things like machine learning, leveraging things like reasoning and understanding that's actually taking advantage of the platform, you start to create new capabilities inside of the underlying communication fabric that actually have never existed before. And so if you look to the next 10 years, you should expect the combination of mobility of experience, whether it's in the context of vertical scenarios, whether it's in the context of horizontal market scenarios and how people interact and engage with each other, coupled with this intelligence, you're going to start to make a lot of our lives that much easier for when we connect and try to get things done together.
Thanks. Adam, you're kind of the new kid on the block because all these other people had representation on stage 8 years ago or 10 years ago. So what's your take on where we're headed?
First of all, Jim, thank you for calling me the new kid on the block. I'll definitely
make you feel younger.
Any advantage there, I will take. So, I mean, and I think here's our perspective on it. When 10 years ago, when sort of UC became the in vogue messaging, marketing, and sort of technology theme, I don't think we envisioned the world that we're in today, where the bits and bytes of what we're working on kind of fly around in these virtual containers, and products like Slack and some of the things that Google has start to amplify the ability for that information to be exchanged without requiring the same type of file construct that we've been living with for so many years, even before computers, in fact, right? Which started with the paper memorandums. So this notion that the data is contained in some sort of object like a file was expected to be the norm, and that's not really the case right now. We're starting to see the data kind of unlock from those file constructs and be exposed in many different types of collaborative processes. Again, the communication piece usually coming in as an additional complementary layer on top. Now, it depends on exactly what process we're talking about, of course, but for the most part, we're seeing a ton of work go on between collaborators in a document where in the past they would have required a phone call to sort of accelerate and get things done. Now they can get it all done in a chat conversation or escalate it to a face-to-face video conversation right in the context of the document. And so I think clearly as is often the case, the future that you envision ends up being a little bit different when you actually get there. And so I think, you know, the notion of unified communications is significantly different today from what we thought it was going to be 10 years ago. And that's why you've got companies like Google coming in and offering a sort of take on it, but maybe a non-traditional take, and not necessarily looking to, you know, replace all those existing phone systems and PBXs that you have, whether they're on-premise or in the cloud, but really approach it from kind of a new way to work and creating, you know, kind of the virtual equivalent of everybody in the same room at the same time, at the same whiteboard, regardless of where they are in the world or what device they're trying to participate in that collaboration on.
Rowan, you've been at Cisco for a short time, but clearly your fingerprints are all over your current strategy. So same question, but keeping that in mind.
Well, we pivoted big time to the cloud 3 years ago. You know, it feels like UC is a thing of the past, to directly answer the question. Why is Slack not here? Great question. Maybe they don't need to be here. They seem to be doing pretty good, doing whatever it is that they're doing. You know, they're out raising for a $5 billion round right now. I mean, the fastest growing enterprise company in history, really, at this point, in the collaboration space. I think that's pretty fascinating. We believe, and I believe personally, that not only is like the biggest change in the last 10 years is mobile, and the biggest change on mobile is messaging. You know, mobile's eating the world, messaging is eating the world. It's the killer app on mobile. It's what's driving mobile, really. If you look at WhatsApp or you know, Facebook Messenger, I mean, these are all like billion user platforms nearly. And we saw that as sort of a major transformation for business communications. And I actually agree with everything that Zig said around totally reimagining that experience. We came at it from the messaging perspective. We said messaging is going to be the hub where you start and end your communications, and from there you can go into voice or video or conferencing or sharing and so on, but it all kind of revolves around this common concept of messaging, because there's now billions of people doing it and billions of people familiar with it, and it seems to be a great way to communicate. And you can see that in the traction that, you know, these mobile messaging companies are starting to get. So I think that's a brand new take. It just kind of turns this entire industry on its head. And we rethought this whole thing 3 years ago and started building that fabric. And I think one thing that's interesting when everyone talks about cloud, but you know, there's a sort of a really important acid test when it comes to really, are you cloud or are you just saying it? Are you fully multi-tenant, and are you operating this infrastructure? Because it's the cost advantages are one thing, but when you talk about a true cloud like what Google is doing or what Cisco has started with Spark, that's a next generation cloud operated by Cisco, managed by Cisco, delivered by Cisco. And it's multi-tenant. And that's really important because one of the you know, I find a lot of customers who want to go to the cloud, but they want just the good parts. They don't want, they want the things they want and not everything. They don't want updates pushed to their mobile app every week, for example. You know, they say, well, that's great that I can get this cool thing and it's cheaper and it has great features, but I don't want any updates without me approving them, for example. So whenever I hear about folks in the industry talking about cloud, you got to really go and say, did you really go to a true multi-tenant, you know, operator hosted and managed service? Are you delivering updates every week? Are you really cloudy, or is it a false cloud?
Well, can I follow up on that though? I mean, a false cloud. You know, if I don't want updates every week because I have a business reason or a governance reason or whatever, why should I have to have them?
Well, because the biggest thing that has transformed with the cloud is that there's one copy of the cloud, essentially. There's one version of it. It's not software. I mean, the thing that it's being operated by someone else, that's just hosted managed services. That's 10 years ago. What's truly transformational is that you basically take an architecture which you can deliver the same experience to millions of people, and you can iterate quickly. You know, what has transformed the experience on mobile is apps that are updating all the time, delivering new capabilities for their users. And if you go back to the software world, it's companies like Microsoft and Cisco and all of us providing, you know, CDs essentially to our customers to stand them up in their own data centers and operate those infrastructures independently. I mean, you couldn't ask a Google to run, you know, 35,000 different copies of, you know, Hangouts so that their customers can pick and choose which updates they want to choose to deploy. It's just like iOS. You can't choose, well, I don't want, this latest thing. You're forced to upgrade. You have to upgrade to the latest. And that is a really important distinction. It's not probably very popular with every customer, as you're pointing out, but that's the reality of the world.
Well, that's what I was going to say. When people respond to surveys or talk to analysts or whoever and talk about the enterprise wants control, that's it. I want to push out the updates I want to push out for the reasons that I think my business needs to do that.
And then users hate you for it.
But very
That's
important point, if I might add to this, is just that enterprises want the ability to have a constantly up-to-date, fresh service, and they don't want to actually have to sort of say, well, give me all of the complexity that comes with that, but they also want to be in control of when and how that happens as well. And so it's this important balance you have to create in a multi-tenant platform that's really hard to do. That's not something that, that's why you don't have, for example, that's why you don't have 20 public cloud companies that are out there today. Right. There's 3 by and large. So it's important context, and you're hitting on a very important and relevant point.
And they are companies. Look, we found our stride with WebEx. We are doing this with WebEx today. I mean, when you're on WebEx, you can either be on there's essentially 2 versions. There's the lockdown version that you can choose to be on, or you can be on the latest. That's what Salesforce does too. And I think that's one of the approaches to this, is that you can either sort of be on the cutting edge and get the latest and greatest, or you can be in the lockdown, and that moves a little slower. But fundamentally, there's just 2 that you can be on. There's not 20. There's not 2,000.
So there's not kind of a single cloud destination. There's maybe not infinite numbers, but there are a few. But
the point is, it's operated by Cisco. It's maintained by Cisco. It's a multi-tenant environment. That's a really critical distinction, because otherwise when we talk about cloud, we're just talking about managed services. And that's just taking my same old server and hosting it at somebody's data center, and then that's an individual standalone instance, and then you don't get any of the benefits. You don't get 99% of the benefits of cloud. That's what I call the false cloud, is when you say, well, people want to have it their way, which basically means we packaged it up so it'll run in VM and shipped it out to a service provider to host it.
I've been watching a lot of political debates, and I've learned a lot from them, how to ask questions. So, Rowan, it seemed to me that as you were starting your conversation about that, you had some competitors' names in mind that were false cloud.
I don't know my competitors' architectures, but I just, when anyone ever says, we hybrid and we get to have it their way, and blah 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 blah, I just know that this is a really hard transition to make, and I think we should ask all the vendors, is it a true cloud, or is it a old school, hybrid cloud, false cloud?
Yeah, if I could jump in on the conversation as well. I mean, we have lived through an age of asking the organization what do they need, and then building a very bespoke system for them. SAP, Oracle are great examples of that. And as we look back now, I think, yes, we run our businesses on those things, but I'm not sure any of us sort of enjoy interacting with them. In fact, there's a whole industry around making the interaction with SAP or Oracle more enjoyable for the users. And I think that the cloud, it's a bit of a paradox for a large enterprise that's used to getting everything they want, or at least some good amount of things that they want that are unique to them. Because, of course, in their perspective, that's ideal. But if you take a step back, and this is building on what Rowan was saying, and you build 10,000 of these customized clouds, you then really start to lose the reliability and the simplicity, right? While it seems great to have 100 knobs and dials to turn, you then really put yourself at risk of not having every one of those things optimized. And not only is that potentially suboptimal for your organization, but again, when you look at it on aggregate, it lowers the reliability for everyone using that cloud. And so that's a little bit of a paradox for large enterprises, is sort of understanding that if you want to consume some of these incredibly reliable, usable, global infrastructures offered by the public cloud providers, you're going to have to understand that it's not going to be the way it was before in terms of your special processes and customized instances of these services. You're going to have to adapt to what's available within the parameters of that service in order to make the best use of it.
One good question is, can I get everything you have on my premise? And if the answer is yes, there's something wrong. Could I get Skype on premise, Zig?
No, you can't.
There you go. So that's right, that architecture.
So one point that Adam was saying I think is really important, and what we've seen is, first of all, when you put these things in the cloud and you say, look, this is the way it's going to be, and you have to adapt your business to it, it's not going to be successful. So what we found is putting that in the cloud, having it multi-tenant, true cloud, but having it, number one, extensible, very, very important. So allow the customer to add their unique value. Even though it's up in the cloud, let them add that value to that. Secondly is workflow automation is becoming much, much more important in that UC space. And that's another method for the customer to be able to add their value, but still have that in a true cloud. Thirdly is we're also seeing unified communications and contact center getting closer and closer and closer. So having those as two separate true cloud just doesn't make any sense anymore. Those are going to converge and are converging very, very quickly. And I think the real test is go to the dev team and say, if this is true cloud, how agile is it? Is your cost coming down? Are you able to implement more quickly? And are you forced to adapt your business? Or does that true cloud adapt to you? And I think those are the real questions to ask.
One of the things they do on those political debates sometimes, especially when there's a lot of candidates, is have a show of hands. So you brought up the point is, are your costs coming down? So can I have a show of hands of those who think that for a large enterprise, moving to the cloud will bring your costs down?
Massive.
Okay, Wes and Ram?
Yep.
Why not?
I think it depends, right? I think it really depends where they're starting from, what they plan to leverage, what type of investments they've made, and are they just working within a UC confines, and is it the same old over-the-top type environment? Are they really trying to work across a workflow? I agree with the point that Gary made. When you start seeing assets be decoupled, like contact center, and you can take and decouple it from the hardware and turn skills-based routing into find an expert type capabilities. They're embedded back into the workflow. That becomes a real game changer. So it's not me not raising my hand. We save big companies lots of money, but it's a case-by-case basis, and it's not a UC-only discussion. It has to thread across this entire environment, and it has to be a native existence. It can't continue to be the same OTT existence that we've built to date.
So I kind of agree with Wes here. So basically, cloud means if it's a private cloud, I think you can save a lot of money. But going into the public cloud, it really depends. You have to do your TCO, 5 to 7 year TCO. We have met a lot of our customers and have done that exercise when they wanted to go into the public cloud. They think that they're going to save some money, but on long run, you are definitely going to spend a lot of money. So it depends on what you want to go into. That's where you need to judge.
Where are you going to spend the money?
So typically in enterprise case, you're going to spend money in upgrading your infrastructure to maybe a virtualized private cloud type of environment, and then tenantizing it, and then definitely going in that direction. So that's the right way to go.
And for us, our cloud business grew 44% last quarter, 200,000 users. So I mean, there are clearly people voting cloud, and they wouldn't do that unless there was a financial incentive to do that. So again, I just think you've got to sit and work through the economics. Each scenario is unique.
Yep. I think the two biggest things we see are, one, flexibility. You just get a huge amount of flexibility that you don't get necessarily on premise. Just being able to flex up and down literally in minutes is just a huge, huge advantage. Secondly is the flexibility of the deployment methods rather than just choosing one way on premise. The fact that I have lots of ways to do it. I can choose, does my data leave the premise or not leave the premise? Does my data stay completely on the cloud? Do I use the cloud as compute horsepower and storage, but I have all my workflows on premise? That flexibility also gives you just lots of knobs to be able to turn to save very quickly. And we've seen exactly that.
I have some opinions that I'll save for another time and write an article about it, because I think these issues are things that are going to change this industry. And I think we'll have winners and losers based on investments being made. And Eric, if you don't mind, I'm going to take this first question because I want to add to that one. The first question from the audience is, how do we get video calls to be as easy as making a phone call? And it says vendor agnostic, simple, and works. I want to change this a little bit. I want to have that answer, but I like to ask both Zig and Rowan this question, because I know that there's a lot of large enterprise customers out there that are a bit frustrated with interoperability. They have bought solutions from different vendors, or they've acquired companies that have products, video products from different solutions. and they're not interoperable. And so it's a pain to get these things set up. So could each of you answer that general question? How do you make them simple? Which you might also say, we've pretty much done that, but what's the interoperability issue? And Rowan, you're shaking your head. I'll have you go first.
Okay. Well, yeah, we firmly believe in interoperability. Is the root of this company, of Cisco's existence, is making everything talk to each other. And I think acquiring Econo is very much in line with that thinking, that we want everything to work together. And they've done an incredible job of making essentially all systems talk to each other. Now, it would be great if those things could talk to each other natively, but apparently that's too much work. So they've figured that out, and that's now in our portfolio, and we make that a core part of our offer, that interoperability, and we're committed to doing that for the long run. In terms of how do we get to that next generation, I think, and Zig said this earlier, and I'll repeat it, we see a real next generation communications fabric that allows, there's no, the difference between voice and video is whether your camera is on. And today, they're completely different systems, and this is crazy. Well, as we've introduced, Spark, for example, we changed that. We've completely transformed that entire experience so that it literally is just a matter of, is the microphone on, is the camera on? Do you have that capability? So any call can be a video call, any call can be a voice call. You can choose which one you want to do. That's the direction we're heading in, and we've chosen to make that entire platform open. So by making it open, not only through Econo, but also through native APIs in the cloud, we're sort of making a big statement here. And part of the reason why we think, back to the cloud question, why cost is important is because video needs to become free. I mean, the voice and video communications are going to zero. And you can't do that unless you're taking advantage of multiple orders of magnitude of cost improvements from big companies that can provide those services for free, essentially, and monetized in other ways. And that's the expectation in this. Well, I mean, look, you can go get a phone and make video calls basically for free. So why is it that you come into business and you need to go spend millions and millions of dollars? That shouldn't be the case. And that's the expectation, I think, is that all of these things are trending towards zero, and companies like ours have to continue to add value on top and drive ubiquity. I see a world where we have video in, every single conversation, and if you don't want to be on camera, you just turn your camera off. Every device, every communications device will have a camera, and that's an option for you, on or off.
So just one other comment there, I think, Rowan, is not only video is part of every conversation, but video is part of every application, right? I don't want to be in one application conversing with someone and then have to go to a different application to do the video. So that embedded nature is got to be very important.
That's why we've been pushing so hard on WebRTC. Like, this stuff has to be integrated and embeddable into the workflow that you're already in, not jumping out into a separate application.
So before Zig gets to his answer, I want to follow up with Rowan. If video and voice are going to be free, and what's the value that you can add if those?
Oh my God, there's so many more interesting things that we can add. I mean, just transporting bits, camera bits and audio bits is not really that interesting. Right. There's a whole world of things that can be done. I mean, all the openness that we need to have to integrate with all of your systems, augmented reality, even moving into virtual reality, cognitive. I think, as Zig mentioned, having virtual assistants that can help you, in the sense, sort of Amazon Echo in your meeting kind of idea. I mean, those things are made possible by a ubiquitous and pervasive sort of communications fabric. And today we're just kind of, I think the industry is struggling to just stitch the basic things together, but that's going to pass, and then we're going to be able to start to see a tremendous amount of value. And our plan was not to make that something that just Cisco delivers, but we built an open platform so that anyone can build apps on our platform that leverage our basic communication fabric.
Let me let Zig answer on mobile or on interoperability.
Yeah, this is a great question about video, simple and easy as it is to make phone calls. There's probably no better example than looking at Skype, where today, we have over 50% of the traffic on our worldwide Skype network that is actually video-based calling that takes place. It's simple, it's consistent, it works across any device that people are interacting with. And there's a lot of lessons to learn from that example and on how that actually starts to apply to the way you make those scenarios available inside of the business environment, which is why we've made such a huge investment in Skype for Business and creating a consistency and familiarity in that experience with what people have been experiencing on Skype. Now, the other dimension around this is, this topic about interop. And, we believe very deeply in the idea of enabling native interop There's a whole variety of solutions. Rowan mentioned Akano as an example, who do virtual meeting-based interoperability. You know, our goal on this is actually to try to reduce the amount of sort of, for lack of a better term, duct tape and chewing gum stitching together that you have to do in order to be able to create easy interop. And so part of what we did in the Skype for Business server release is we enabled the video interop server capability service capability where you can do native 264-based interop with a Cisco meeting room, for example. And you should stay tuned for more with respect to what we're going to be doing in the cloud area. But this is a very important topic. And it's really, at the end of the day, how do you do this without creating another set of overhead for management to be able to do the interop at the same time creating another user experience that someone has to learn? Interop should be something that feels native to the experience for people and be able to connect the dots across a variety of different room systems that people have, including Skype-based experiences that are in those rooms.
I want to quickly add to that. I think Rowan just mentioned in regards to interoperability, there is the user experience thing and the value we can add. On the other side, there are the basics we need to solve as vendors. One thing which I want to mention, and a couple of us are organized in the IMTC. IMTC is an example for an industry consortium, neutral consortium, where vendors are working together and figuring that out. This is really hard work, week by week, people getting together and think about how can we make this much easier for our customers, that this is really working, the basics. And as an example, and just want to mention it, in May this year, we are getting together for the Super Up, IMTC Super Up, where all the vendors, being members there, getting together. This year it will be in Orlando. Microsoft is there, Cisco is there, we are there, Unify, we are there. We are working this out. There is at the end the Super Connect session where all the different vendors are bringing all the equipment together, all the solutions, and then they are having one big video session. So this is something which is driving the industry, which is solving the basics. And then for everybody of us, it's of course our task to make our experience even better, right?
I think the one thing though on video is the experience has got to be the same one our kids expect today. They go, they tap, they want to add somebody in, they hit a plus button. It's got to be that simple. So when we talk about how to make it vendor agnostic, how do we make it simple, how do we make it just work, the bar has been set there. So we need to kind of reset our entry point a bit and really think about it from that perspective. Because video, whoever said it, video is the way. I mean, it's how we're going to interact. It should start with video and then digress to something else.
And to that point, I know we're talking mostly about UC, but where we're seeing the fastest growth is video exposed out on the customer-facing side.
That's right.
This is going to be the new way for you to interact with your customer. Not so much because you want to see your customer, but it could be that you want to see what your customer can see. So how you support them, how you know their environment. So this ability to, again, be embedded. They don't want to go to a separate application. They want it to be right inside the iOS app that they're using. They want it to be right inside the Android. So I think we're going to see this explosion of video not only on the employee-facing side, but we're going to see it even faster on the customer-facing side.
So am I ever going to be able to make a Google Hangout call to a Skype client?
You guys are working on 264.
I was going to ask that.
Or vice versa.
I'm going to say yes through a third-party integration.
But Google's working on a 264-based support codec, right?
Yeah.
So that'll help.
I mean, I think it does come down to a set of standards that everybody can kind of get behind, and that set of standards for real-time video communication is just emerging at this point. I think we're pretty involved in what's going on there, and I think, ultimately there's another real challenge that's in some ways working against the interoperability, and that is as these messaging networks seek to grow their user bases into the hundreds of millions and billions, they actually are incented to kind of keep people in that network right now. Now, they are exposing APIs, but I think there's more work to be done there as they achieve that sort of critical mass and feel more comfortable exposing more of their platform. And that's sort of maybe working at a little bit of a cross purpose towards this, general open purpose interoperability across all these different networks. But I do think that as those achieve that critical mass, and you're seeing it, on some of the North American ones, the WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, WeChat over in Asia, a couple of other those, as they reach that type of critical mass and maturity of their platform, you will see more and more of the interoperability APIs open up, as well as third parties coming in to fill some of those gaps.
All right. We can take one more question if anyone has anything else on Twitter while we wait for that. I just want to kind of follow up on kind of the interoperability issue at the more basic level of I've got what I've got now, and it needs to be more interoperable. If we have this discussion every year, and there's never really a great answer. Is the answer going to be the cloud somehow or other? The cloud is going to improve interoperability, or do we just have to wait and get to a point where the cloud, we live in an uninteroperable world until somehow the cloud changes things?
I see multiple dimensions, but I mean, obviously, I think the industry standards are pretty well defined. SIP and 264 pretty much are the industry standards. I mean, we open sourced our 264 for the browser vendors to integrate it into for Microsoft and Google, which I think that's been ratified and it's moving forward. So we'll get that based in every single web browser and every desktop at some point. That's important, especially for the thing that we were talking about earlier with customer video. I think there's a new generation of interoperability. It's not just about seeing your face or hearing your voice. That's a nice start. But the experience that all of the folks hopefully are building are far beyond that. And there are no standards defined for those next generation kinds of experiences. So I may be able to interact with, hopefully at some point, someone in the Skype network. But if all I can do is see their face and hear their voice, and there's a total rich experience around me from my application that I don't get to share with that person, it's kind of a broken experience. So the new interoperability is APIs and RESTful APIs on the web. And so if you think about that, there's a whole new way of imagining what the world becomes like. So it's not just about these simple communication pipes and voice and video bits. It's about this much more rich and extended experience. Because, look, I wouldn't want to talk to someone if I get this great experience, but 95% of it gets cut off if I just happen to go through this little narrow channel to, through 264 and SIP communication.
So I just would say that we're deeply committed to the reality of what our customers are living with, which is, people have made many years of investments in, using the example of meeting rooms, of video conferencing equipment. Although it's not every single meeting room, there's a lot of investment out there, and people expect that set of investments to actually be able to coexist with this new world to some extent. I mean, it's hard to do it with a 20-year-old piece of equipment, but if you bought something that is 5, 6, 7, 8 years old and it's up to date, up to a certain level of software, people expect that world to be able to connect in at least at a basic level. And I think, there is a commitment on the part of Microsoft to make that easier. And I think the more that we work on that, the more it'll be, I think, accruing to people's ability to be able to deploy a lot of these services that we've been describing.
Okay. And with that, we do have to close. I want to thank you for your questions. I want to thank our panel for your participation. And we'll break for lunch now and be back with an afternoon session.
Thank you.
Great.